Why your dog never lets you cry alone. Eleanor had not cried in front of anyone for 11 years, not at her husband's funeral, not at the hospital, on the 2 occasions that had required hospitals, not in front of her daughter, who lived 3 hours away and called on Sundays, not in front of her neighbor Margaret, who brought soup when Eleanor's back was bad and asked how she was doing in the particular way that meant she expected a fine. Eleanor was a woman who had learned, somewhere in the long middle of her life, that composure was a form of kindness to others, and eventually, quietly, to herself. She had worn it for so long it had become indistinguishable from her. Biscuit was the exception. Biscuit was a 7-year-old Labrador mix, tawny Lachpot, with the particular gentleness of a dog who had always understood that his job was not to perform affection but to offer it. Eleanor had gotten him 2 years after her husband died, on the advice of her doctor, who had said something about routine and purpose that she had barely heard through the fog of that particular afternoon. She had gone to the shelter expecting a small dog, something manageable, something that wouldn't take up too much space in a house that already felt too large. She had come home with Biscuit, who took up considerable space and made no apologies for it, on the evening of the first real cry, a Tuesday in November. No particular occasion, just the long accumulation of ordinary grief arriving all at once through a door she had forgotten to lock. Biscuit was asleep in his usual spot by the radiator. Eleanor was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She wasn't drinking, looking at nothing in particular. The crying started quietly, the way it does when it has been held back for a long time, and finally finds a door left ajar. Not dramatic, not loud, the kind of crying that is mostly just breathing. Biscuit was beside her before she heard him move. He didn't jump, he didn't bark, he didn't do any of the things a dog does when he wants attention or is startled or is performing comfort for an audience. He pressed the full weight of his head into her lap and stayed there, completely still, breathing slowly, while Eleanor cried for the first time in 11 years. He didn't try to stop it. He didn't look up at her with the anxious expression of a creature asking to be reassured. He simply stayed, warm and heavy and entirely present, as if he had been waiting all this time, for exactly this, for her to finally stop being so careful. Dogs know when you are crying. Not approximately, not roughly. They know with a precision that researchers have only recently begun to map, and the mechanism behind it is stranger and more layered than most people expect. A study from Goldsmiths University of London found that dogs were significantly more likely to approach a crying person than a person who was humming or talking normally, and critically, they approached strangers who were crying just as readily as they approached their own owners. This was not learned behavior, it was not trained, it appeared to be something closer to instinct, a deep, cross-species pull toward a human in distress, regardless of familiarity, regardless of history, regardless of whether there was any relationship at all. The distress itself was enough. But for a dog who knows their person, who has spent years building an interior map of that person's emotional landscape, learning the specific texture of their calm and the specific texture of their grief, the response goes much further than instinct. Eleanor noticed it in the weeks that followed that first Tuesday. She had started, quietly and with some deliberateness, to allow herself to cry when the grief came, always in the kitchen, always in the evening, always with the tea she rarely finished, and Biscuit was always there, not because she called him, not because there was food involved or a walk being offered, or any other concrete reward that a behaviorist might point to. He arrived the way you arrive when you love someone and you sense, before they have said anything, that they need you, before they ask, sometimes before they know it themselves. What was happening, neurologically, was layered and precise. Dogs process emotional information through multiple channels at once, with a speed and sensitivity that human instruments have only recently become sophisticated enough to detect. They read facial expressions. Research from the University of Lincoln confirmed that dogs distinguish between happy and sad human faces, even when those faces belong to complete strangers. They read vocal tone. The particular frequency and broken rhythm of crying triggers a specific orienting response in the canine nervous system, different from speech, different from laughter, recognized immediately. They read scent. Human emotional states alter hormonal output in ways that change the body's chemical signature. And dogs, with an olfactory system estimated to be 10,000 times more sensitive than ours, can detect cortisol shifts that occur before visible signs of distress have even begun. By the time Eleanor's eyes filled, Biscuit had already known for several minutes. There is a concept in attachment theory called co-regulation. It describes the process by which one nervous system, through proximity and steadiness, helps another nervous system find its way back to calm. It is what happens when a parent holds a frightened child through the night, when a friend sits beside you in silence after a loss and doesn't try to fix it. The presence of a regulated, grounded nervous system alongside a dysregulated one creates the biological conditions, the hormonal, neurological conditions, for the distressed system to gradually settle. It is not metaphor. It is physiology. Biscuit was doing this for Eleanor. Every Tuesday, every quiet kitchen evening, his breathing was slow and steady against her leg. His weight was constant and warm. Studies measuring dogs during comfort-seeking behavior have found that their heart rate actually decreases when they move toward a distressed human, as if the act of offering steadiness produces steadiness in return. He was not performing. He was not waiting for acknowledgement. He was simply being, with a completeness that Eleanor had rarely experienced from any source, beside a person who needed to not be alone, in the way that only an animal can, without words, without the complicated negotiations that human comfort sometimes requires, without the subtle pressure of someone else's discomfort with your grief. By December, Eleanor had stopped calling it weakness. She called it, on a Sunday afternoon when her daughter asked how she was doing, something she had never said out loud in the 2 years since her husband died. She said she was less alone than she had expected to be. Her daughter, surprised, asked what she meant. Eleanor looked at Biscuit, asleep in a patch of thin winter light on the kitchen floor, one large paw extended, breathing the long, slow breath of a dog with nothing left to worry about, and said simply that she had good company. She did not explain further. Some things are complete without explanation. What the research keeps returning to across different studies, different breeds, different kinds of human grief and human distress, is that dogs do not move toward crying humans because they have been conditioned to, or because they expect something in return. They move toward crying humans because something in their nature, shaped across 15,000 years of living alongside us, oriented toward us, built around us, compels them toward the moments when we are most human, most open, most vulnerable, most in need of something that will not judge the need. Biscuit never let Eleanor cry alone. Not once. Not in all the Tuesdays that followed. Not in the ones that became easier. Not in the ones that didn't. He was there before she called him, beside her before she knew he needed him, steady in the way that only a dog can be steady, without condition, without limit, without ever once asking her to be anything other than exactly what she was. If this video stayed with you, share it with someone who has ever been found, in a quiet moment, by their dog. And if you want to understand what your dog is telling you every day, in every quiet moment, subscribe to Silent Pawpack, because they speak more than words. We just have to learn how to listen.